Now, runner beans really are one of those food plants that we should all grow if we can. They're super easy, massively productive, and along the way they're loads of fun and they're really, really attractive. In fact, runner beans have been in cultivation for about 5,000 years. They started out being used for food in Central America, and in about the 15th century, Columbus brought them back from America to Europe, where they grew them not for their beans, but for their beautiful crimson red flowers. Now, those red flowers are very, very popular with pollinating bees, and in the USA, they actually attract loads and loads of hummingbirds in widespread parts of the States. But we do grow them for food now, and they're very, very productive. They're a warm weather plant, so we're only planting them out after all threat of frosts have gone. These are some fabulous runner bean seedlings that we've started out in the safety of this greenhouse. You can see why they call them runner beans though. Look at these guys. They've got roots at the bottom, shoots and leaves out the top. They really want to get going. They want to get into the ground. Now, before you can plant your runner beans, you have to give them something to grow on. So what kind of support depends on how many plants you're going to put into your garden. We've got an allotment here, we've got plenty of space, so we're going to build ourselves a structure. And this is how we're going to do it. Now, all sorts of architecture goes into putting up bean poles. People make things pretty complicated and also quite simplistic. We like to use bamboo canes, or you can use hazel rods if you can get your hands on them. But whatever you use, it needs to be about 8 foot tall, and you'll need a decent bundle of them. You're going to put poles about 6 inches to a foot apart, and there'll be one plant at the bottom of each pole. So work out how many plants you're going to plant, and then you'll know how many poles you'll need. You will also need a sharp knife. And we use biodegradable garden twine, so that at the end of the season, when you cut it all down, if it drops back into the garden, no problems. Okay, that's our equipment check done. Time to get on with it. It's best to run bean poles from north to south so that both sides get sunshine. Push 2 poles firmly into the soil about 3 feet or a metre apart and tie at the top. Repeat with more pairs of poles until your run's completed. Fixing poles along the top will add extra strength. Remember to tie your knots tightly because things will stretch. Add a couple of additional horizontal runs of poles along both sides to firm things up and give your beans more to climb on. Okay, so this frame is now ready for our seedlings, but are our seedlings ready for our frame? So our runner beans have been growing inside this greenhouse where it's really, really warm. And it's pretty warm outside, but there's a difference in temperature. So if you've spent your life in a nice warm greenhouse and you go outdoors and it drops a few degrees, you might get a bit of a shock, you might wilt, you might even curl up and die. We don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to harden off our seedlings. Hardening off literally means hardening up. So during the day, you take your seedlings out of the greenhouse and you put them in the shade or in a cool spot, and then at night, you get your seedlings, you put them back in the safety of the greenhouse, because it's those overnight temperatures that can cause your seedlings to wilt and give up. Now, thankfully, things are really warming up here, so we don't have to do this for too many days. The overnight temperature's going down to about 8 degrees, so that's pretty cozy. We're not too worried about it. But in cooler parts of the country, you might take up to a week to harden off your seedlings. Okay, so our seedlings are hardened off, and we've got minimum nighttime temperatures now of about 8 degrees centigrade. That's about 45 Fahrenheit. So we know it's not going to be too cold for them, and we can get them in the ground. Now, the location for planting runner beans, you really want a dry, sunny spot with protection from strong winds. Well, we've got a dryish, sunny spot here, but we're coastal and it is a little bit windy, which just goes to show that you kind of can't have everything, but we still are going to grow beans. We want to have them, and we'll take a chance on the winds. Now, if your soil is relatively fertile and holds a bit of moisture, then you really only need to give a little dressing of a sort of a multi-purpose manure. This is chicken manure here, just before you plant. If your soil is quite dry and not very fertile, then you're going to need to dig a bean trench, and you normally do a bean trench a month or so before the time of planting. To do a bean trench, you want to dig out a trench about 3 foot wide, so about 1 meter wide, and 2 foot deep. So it's not a small structure, but you'll have plants either side of it. In the bottom of the trench, you're going to put some well-rotted manure or compost. Then you're going to backfill that trench. So you've got this larder of nutrients waiting for those bean plants when they're put into the soil, once all threat of frost is gone, and then they can grow up your support and be super productive. Okay, so we are ready now to go. Plants are all good, the soil's all good, and I'm going to start putting them in. So it's pretty straightforward planting your runner beans. Push from underneath the tray, give a little tug, out comes your seedling. And you can use a trowel. I prefer to use my hands, as I think you know now. 1 plant per pole. Now each plant can yield up to 1 to 2 pounds of beans. So depending on how voracious you are and how many beans you like to eat, probably a dozen plants would do the average small family, 4 to 5 people. But we are actually going to grow about 30 plants on this frame because we absolutely love them, and you can always give them away, and there is always the delight of chutney later in the season. Your structure does need to be really strong though, because each plant can weigh up to 4 pounds. So we're going to plant 30 plants here. That means that there'll be about, well, 2 to 4 pounds per plant weight. So that means that there'll be about 60 to 120 pounds of weight on this structure. And then of course there's all the foliage, which provides a lot of wind resistance. So you do need something that's fit for purpose. Some people don't do long frames like what we've done. They do wigwams, and that's quite a nice thing to do in a smaller space. You can even do it on a roof. So to do a wigwam, you need about 6 poles between 6 and 8 foot tall, and you put those poles around a circle with a diameter of about 2 feet. So about, say, an arm's length across. You put your poles around it and you join them at the top and you tie them kind of like a wigwam. And then you can put a bean at the bottom of each of those poles and up they'll go. Now that's all the beans I'm going to be planting for today. I've left some space at the lower half of our frame so that we can plant more beans in a few weeks' time. That staggers our staggering harvest of delicious green pods, which will be coming in the summer months. Now, when we come back to plant, we won't be putting seedlings in, we'll be sowing seeds. And the rule of sowing seeds is that it has to be a bit technical here. Your soil should be no less than about 10 degrees centigrade, so that's 50 degrees Fahrenheit. How on earth do we work that out? Well, you can buy cheap soil thermometers online. So if you want to, you can measure the temperature of your soil so that you're sure it's a good time to sow your seeds. Or you can do what I do, which is to just go, has summer arrived? Does it feel stable and warm? Look over the fence, what's everybody else doing? I kind of figure that this soil is warm enough for sowing seeds now. And if you get to that point, which we will in a few weeks' time here, what we're talking about in mild parts of the country where summer comes early, you're talking about late spring. In cooler parts of the country, you want to really wait till summer has properly arrived. But you'll basically put a couple of seeds at the base of each pole, and once they sprout, you'll pinch out the strongest, the weakest one, so that the strongest one grows on. And then that will give you another crop of beans a month after your initial crop. When it comes to harvesting your beans, ideally you want to pick your pods when they're no bigger than about 8 inches. So what are we talking about? That's about 20 centimeters in length. Bigger than that, they begin to get tough and a bit stringy. At the end of the season, it's quite nice to leave a few beans on the vine so that they fully ripen. and then you get the hardened seeds, which you can actually dry and store in the winter to use for soups and stews, or you might even give them a go and sow them again next spring or summer. So runner beans, fantastic plant to grow, fun for everybody, beautiful, great for nature, great for the table.